Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Jaemin Frazer. Jaemin is the founder of the Insecurity Project and specializes in helping entrepreneurs, leaders, and business owners eradicate insecurity so they can show up to life unhindered by doubt, fear, and self-limiting beliefs. And who doesn't want that? He is widely recognized as one of Australia's best life coaches and a leading voice globally on the subject of personal insecurity. Jaemin is the author of several personal development books, including Unhindered, the 7 Essential Practices for Overcoming Insecurity, Elegantly Simple Solutions to Complex People Problems, and the 1 Minute Coach, based on the popular 1 Minute Coach radio segment heard by over 750,000 listeners daily. Jaemin is a dynamic speaker who skillfully blends a lifetime of experience in leadership and coaching with his passion for human behavioral science and peak performance. His pragmatic and direct approach to vulnerable subjects about mental health and well-being are a breath of fresh air, and his work is known for producing lasting results. So please welcome to the show, Jaemin Frazer. Jaemin, thank you so much for being here this morning. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Not a problem, not a problem. Well, why don't we get started and tell the audience about you and how you got to where you are? Because I'd like people to know a little bit more about the guests and how they've gotten to where they are now.
Yeah, sure. So great introduction. Thank you. So obviously the Insecurity Project is my thing, and coaching ambitious people, often midlifers who have never really done the deep dive around reviewing their own narratives about themselves. And so it's a structured approach to helping them eradicate insecurity. But how I got here, I think it's probably important to go back, maybe 20 years when I got a start as the church pastor, the senior pastor of the church that I grew up in. And I was 23. I thought that was way too young to be given that responsibility, but nevertheless, I was entrusted with that role. We also had a Christian school and a daycare center. So there was some lots of business challenges as well. But the interesting process around being a pastor is, you're invited into people's world to have conversations about change. And I just got to realize that those conversations very rarely led to change, that I was having the same conversations with the same people in the same way. And it confused me. And it seemed that the strategy for change most Christians were using was to outsource the responsibility for change to God. If I pray, if I read my Bible, if I come to church, then God will magically somehow change the bits about me that I don't like or the things that I'm struggling with. And I always thought that was a little strange, because it felt like our greatest gifts had been responsibility and choice. And most people wanted to give them back and live with the illusion of no choice and blame and excuse instead. It was all God's responsibility and all God's fault. So then when I got introduced to the coaching skill set from a mentor of mine, I was just gobsmacked. I thought, this is a missing technology and this belongs. And so that began a really quick process for me into the coaching world, because it was such a deep resonance and something that I'd been wrestling with for some time. And so straight away went and did some study. And the coaching space, at least in our country, I'm not sure about in the US, there is no barrier to entry. So it's not a regulated space. So that's wonderful and terrifying at the same time, because all kinds of people can do this. But I just kind of thought, this is so strongly resonating in me. I think I can start straight away. So, very early on in my training process, I thought I've got enough here, coupled with my experience working with people, my desire to make lasting change. I reckon I can start a coaching business. So overestimated my ability and underestimated how hard it was going to be. But nevertheless, was wholehearted about being useful to people in that space. But interestingly, as I stepped into a bigger world, uncovered a mountain of insecurity in my own life. So, I'd grown up in the church. I was known there. I was good in that space. I understood the rules of the game. I played confidently, and then to step out into a different space, it was like, I don't know if I'm good enough for this, or I can do this. Will this work? Right. And so it was a terrifying experience, having already stepped out, to then go, hang on, now I've uncovered a mountain of fear. And I realized I only really had two choices. I could shrink back to what I knew, what was safe, known, and comfortable, or I could begin a journey around solving this problem that I just discovered. And I thought, well, I can't imagine dying with the music inside me when this is all said and done. So I better face this fear. And that began a journey to discover, whether it was a solvable problem or whether you just manage it. And thankfully, I discovered a whole range of people who had, in my estimation, overcome insecurity, that they weren't living based on the need to prove themselves or defend themselves. They were very secure in who they were. And my question was, how do they do it? And so
Right.
I'm a very structured thinker. I have kind of an engineering bent towards how my brain works. And so I want to deconstruct. I want to break things down to their smallest moving parts. And so that began a journey of me understanding the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity, which is the book that I've written and my life's work. So it wasn't to invent a strategy for overcoming insecurity. It was to discover one that existed, but then to model it and to create a clear frame around it so that I could use it, so that others could use it, and then double down on that as a fruit of my own freedom in that space, to then go, I think I could be really useful as a coach, and that's what I'm going to do. And every time I dive into a coaching conversation with someone with the desire to serve them in a transformational journey, then we'd move beyond behavior into beliefs every time, and deep beliefs, the beliefs that were getting in the way. And those beliefs were always personal. They were always these insidious fears around, maybe I can't, maybe I don't belong, maybe I don't deserve, maybe I'm not good enough. So I just knew that I had to keep developing my skill set and helping people deal with that level of themselves. So the Insecurity Project, I'd been coaching for 8 years into the journey before I put a flag in the sand and labeled my brand the Insecurity Project.
Gotcha.
My business coach at the time said that was the wrong name, that I couldn't do that just because people are insecure about being insecure. So, and it kind of went against business rules, that I should have been the confidence guy or the self-esteem expert. But I just knew that people suffer greatly for not knowing this is a solvable problem. And it would be very kind to hold back a clear solution from the world if that's what I thought I had. So flag in the sand, Insecurity Project. Now this is my work in the world.
That's awesome. And it's interesting, your background as a pastor, because you understand those belief scenarios,
Exactly.
and it fits so well together. And like you said, a lot of people, have a lot of insecurities. One of the things that seems like that comes up in mind with this whole idea is overcoming fear, self-limiting beliefs. You give people power. Do you, how does that work for people when, after they've been with you, do they see that? Do you show them certain actions to take so that they can continue this journey?
Yeah, they definitely discover power in themselves rather than me giving it to them. One of the key distinctions in the model that I've created, so practice 2 is 100% responsibility, practice 2 of 7. And there's this really beautiful moment of awareness for people going through this process when they realize it's not so much about taking 100% responsibility for their life, but realizing they already are, that their whole life they've thought they got here by the choices of others, by the words of others, by the actions of others. They feel like their life is the sum total of their experience in pain and disappointment and hurt and upset caused by their world. When in fact, when they understand, the nature of being a human is a sense-making creature going into the world, having experiences, but then deciding what those experiences mean about us, they discover, they're the one with the pen. They're the one, they're not the actor in the story. They're the storyteller. They've always been responsible. They've always been the one creating their own results. So therefore, why wouldn't they think they could change? They've created this. So if they've created this, then they can create that. So this natural confidence emerges, that off the back of realizing they've always had everything they needed inside them already, and they've already created their current results. So no need to prescribe action. The overflow of seeing who they really are and what they've already done means that then they can align their future to what they desire rather than what they've tolerated.
And it's interesting too that you talk about that idea that they already have the power. That's good reminder for people. It's they have to connect, I think, maybe their belief with that mindset that says, hey, I've already done this. And it's like riding a bike. You've already done that. Once you learn it, it's just repetition. You picture yourself riding when you were a kid, maybe the first time you're excited about it and everything, and oh yeah, I want to do that again. And you get on and you ride and you feel the breeze in your face. Connecting that subconscious thought to that belief and that action that you see in your head is critical. Is that something it sounds like that's something you help them to, if you will, see again?
It is. And also thinking about a time before insecurity is a really central part of this, and exactly what you're describing. Because if someone feels like they've always had low self-esteem, or they've always had anxiety, or they've never really loved themselves or never believed in themselves, that's not true. That's impossible.
Right.
We come into this world in a very pure place, very aware of our value and worth. You think about a toddler, 0 to 2, the moment something is less than ideal, less than perfect in their world, they demand change. They demand action. Mom, hey, listen, oi, I've dropped my dummy. Come now. It's not, they don't care whether you're busy, whether you're tired, whether you're on the toilet, whether you're on the phone. It's like, hey, listen, I am the most important person in the whole universe, and you exist to serve me. So quickly come now. So there's this very deep awareness of inherent value and worth, wonder and awe, deserve, love. It's all there. It's all there. It's just that as you get older, and maybe you get beyond 2, and then number 2, second kid comes along, and now you're not as cute, and dad doesn't have enough time for you now, and you're expected to do more. And so this perfect feedback loop no longer exists. And now you're questioning, maybe you got it wrong, and questioning why this hurts and what does it mean. And so then you develop these doubts, these insecurities with a limited mind, a childlike mind, trying to make sense of things you don't even understand, forming assumptions and opinions and then doubling down on them. So back to your point, yes, the solution is to go back to what you already had. There is nothing missing here. You're just a misunderstanding. It's all a giant misunderstanding. You're fine. You've always been fine. Yeah. You've just formed these opinions that said you're no good, and now you think they're true.
Wow. And that's really something, because as I've heard that as a child, I mean, you're doubling your capacity in your mind till about the age of 4 or 5. And then you're about running at about 80% until, of the use of your mind by the time you're 5 years old. So imagine all those things that have been put in your mind as you first learn. And like you said, wait, they're not answering right away. Maybe I'm not good enough. What is those crazy feelings that we think, well, I learned this when I was older? You probably learned a lot younger than you think. That's really something. I mean, you think about it, when you're an infant, you just on demand cry and you expect it to be responded to. And we don't allow that for ourselves, because our society and what we've been trained to do in our society has told us, no, you have to be patient, you have to wait, you have to be kind. Nowadays, that's even getting thrown up. You see it in all kinds of scenarios where people don't want to wait, or they want to learn. They're learning at such a fast speed to gain education and to grow. Good information there. Question I had was about insecurity is, how does that affect like your life and business? Tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because if you have this insidious fear deep inside you that there's something lacking or limited with you, that in fact you're not as good, or you're not even good at all, like there's something bad about you, something weak, something broken, something wrong, then all your best energy must go to prove yourself and defend yourself. Now, that's a very inefficient way to live life, let alone run a business, if all your best energy is to prove and defend. So that means less energy for creativity, for productivity, for leadership, or all of these things. So I find it robs people of certainty. They are weakened as a human being. And so that relates to how they run a business. It gets in the way of productivity, so it slows you down because you question yourself more, so you're less decisive. It affects value. If you've noticed that a person's relationship with money is one of the clearest indicators of their relationship with themselves. So if you've undervalued who you are, well, then that shows up in how you value your products and services, and you charge your time. And so you leave money on the table.
Right.
It creates a whole range of kind of handbrake issues in business, especially for, small to medium enterprise entrepreneurs that are solo, even, because it's all them.
Right.
And if they are compromised as a human being, well, they're the one pulling the levers in the business. So it's getting in the way in a significant way.
And that's a reminder for people that, small entrepreneurs got to pay the mortgage too, and that's why there's charges, there's a fee. We've got to be, as a speaker, I often hear this through different trainings. Don't be afraid to state what your price will be. And if you have to, say it to yourself several times, so you get used to saying it. Two, you build your confidence in saying it because of the value you've put into it behind it. We all have intrinsic value. We all have great worth from our creator that's given to us. That helps build our security and our confidence, I think. So, one of the other things you talk about is well-being and mental health. Tell us about that, because this insecurity goes into those. So it's hand in hand in that, doesn't it?
Well, of course it is, because often the conversations about well-being and mental health stop short. I think, interestingly, in the current climate, you're almost rewarded for dysfunction sometimes. Yeah. So, 40 years ago, you couldn't say you had a problem. It's just, no, we don't have problems. You just get on with it. You talk to your dad about a mental health problem, you get a slap. It's like, just toughen up, son. But now it's like you put your hand up and go, oh, hey, by the way, I've got mental health issues. It's like, it's just so wonderful that you've been vulnerable and felt that you could share this. And yeah, we feel sorry for you and great, we understand now. It's like, hang on, the point of vulnerability is so you can get eyes on the problem. But the point of getting eyes on the problem is now you can change it. Yeah. So keep going. Don't stop in vulnerability. Don't stop in labeling yourself with some issue. Great. Come out of hiding. Be clear about what's going on, but then deconstruct why you are the way you are. Because, anxiety is a great example of this. Anxiety needs a backstory to survive.
Okay. Yeah.
People are not anxious about tying their shoelaces in the morning because you've done it 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. No one cares how you do it. No one's watching you do it. You can't fail. You're not going to be judged. So you just do it. You get anxiety about the stuff that you must have some uncertainty around. Perhaps I won't do this right. Perhaps I will be judged. Perhaps I will fail. And so if you didn't have those beliefs, it's actually impossible to be anxious. So the mental health issue around anxiety, it's like, this is still an insecurity issue.
Right.
Understand this comes from your beliefs about who you really are. So you got to keep working all the way back to the root of this if you want to see resolution.
Like gardening, if you really want to get the weed out of the garden, you got to get the roots out. Otherwise, it's going to come back. Great. Well, and how do you help people change their beliefs about themselves with the insecurity? If you can, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I get people come to me because they're in pain, they want change, they're not achieving the life they desire, and so they're very clear about outcomes. And coaching is always a conversation about outcomes. I love that.
Okay.
And so people say, Jaemin, great, you're a coach, so we're forward focused. Yes, we're achieving goals. We want to move towards success. Give me strategies. And often people have this aversion to going back, and they think, I've dealt with the past. The past is the past. You can't change that. No point going back there. Let's just be forward focused. And so I tell people all the time, I never go back into the past. Except when it's necessary. And it's always necessary. So we're going back.
Yeah.
We've got to go back because you're still living out of a blueprint you created for yourself when you're 5. So you made some assumptions about yourself then, and you still think they're true, and it's governing every single thing you do. It's impacting your health, your relationships, your finance. So you can't imagine you're going to achieve success here still operating off that blueprint, that structure to your life, those assumptions, those beliefs. So to change a belief, you got to go back to where you first decided that was true in the first place. When you, in your childish mind, gathered enough data to go, yeah, I can see how this works now. And you formed an assumption and gained certainty around that and locked it in your heart and right, cool, this is now true. I'm not making this up. And then, once you find something is true and you're certain about it, it becomes the filter for how you then process future information. And the brain just goes, cool, well, if that's true, well, now I know what to filter. So I'm only looking for evidence for what I believe is true. Everything gets filtered through that, deleted, distorted, generalized based on that map of the world. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you can't change it from today. That's a ridiculous idea that you could just override it by some affirmations on your mirror and some strategy or some action plans. You want to change your belief, you got to deconstruct this thing. You got to bring it all the way back until you bring new data from here back all the way to the origin of this, and you actually dissolve it. It does not make sense to the very origin. And then you're free to use the pen again and write new beliefs around yourself, new opinions, and reinforce those ones.
So is that something maybe you have your clients do, is after they've broken down that old belief? And I have a picture in my mind of this, of listening to music on a reel-to-reel tape thing, we don't do that now. We stream it. Okay. There's nothing you have to carry around, none of that. And you got to, I love that idea. You've got to change that blueprint. So is that something you help them do, is maybe write out how they want their, if you will, their new life to look?
Of course. So practice 5 in the model is develop a compelling life vision. So that's what drives the whole process. If you don't know what you want, well, there's no point going back into the fear of the past and the uncertainty of dealing with that. So that drives that. And so, yeah, it governs the process all the way. But having cleared the old narrative and seen that all you're really dealing with, all insecurity really is an opinion problem. And most specifically, it's the opinion problem of a scared child or a hurt child or an upset child. So when you go back and help that child see a bigger world and make sense of their world with some better data, then now you have an open space, and you can now create a new map. I love Stephen Covey's beautiful observation that everything's created twice. So the first creation in the unseen world, second creation is just the manifestation of what's already been done by design or by default. So you want new results to show up in your world here, you got to go create them in the unseen world. So that means aligning yourself to what you want, setting directions for how you'd like things to be. So yeah, that's a massive part of the change process, is the structure of deconstructing old ones and replacing them with new ones, the ones that you would like to have.
Right. And people, I don't think there's too many people out there that don't want, a good, productive, nice new pathway that's a bit easier, that's, like you said, more secure, more confident for them. Their mindset and actions to overcoming these beliefs, that's pretty critical in this step then, right?
Oh, of course, there's a clear path. And I love when people come to terms with the fact that they're not special, because people get the special thing around the wrong way. Like they think their problems are special, but their gifts are not. But no, your problems aren't special. Your gifts are. So when you can see your problem's not special, that this is not some weird thing just for you, that no child escapes their childhood without developing limiting beliefs, without picking up some measure of woundedness, not a single one. So it is impossible for any adult to flourish in life without doing the review work of their childhood and replacing limiting beliefs. So this is a predictable process. It's designed like that. That's how this works. So when you can see that, then you can get over yourself and realize, okay, I'm not special. I can trust the process and dive in. That will work for me. And so when people can see there's a clear path, it gives them certainty that they too could walk that and make some significant change. Even though most people won't, most people will still get too scared. They'll just bunker down in their imagination of what they're going to discover back there. Right. They'll be terrorized by that. I love, Seneca or Marcus Aurelius says we suffer more in our imagination and in real life, like the things we are afraid of. They are works of imagination and works of fiction. When you go back and examine what you're really dealing with, it's never a monster. It's just the thought of a monster. When you see under the bed, you're like, it's just a couple of shadows or a couple of mice playing silly buggers with some tin cans and a candle projecting a huge shadow. It's all a misunderstanding. I'm okay.
And it's back to the quote, I think, of Martin Luther King, take the steps even though you don't see the full staircase. You don't know what that opportunity is going to give you. I look at it as, what's the possibility of that opportunity? I tell young students, when I talk to students sometimes, don't be afraid of 2 letters. The word no is 2 letters. That's all it is 2 letters. You can focus on the opportunity. What if you're asking somebody for a date? Don't worry about if she says no. What if she says yes? then what are you going to do? Think of the opportunities, think of where you can go, think of the person you can get to know. Those are what you can focus on. So yeah, I definitely understand that scenario. We need to play that positive result in our mind, I think, and that's critical for what we do. Um, you mentioned in one of your blogs about self-discipline, like fighting against yourself, and you've got to work hard. It's interesting, and working within yourself for a long-lasting success. Is that a kind of it, because you talk about that, but if you can explain that a little more, because I think that kind of goes against what most of society, you were talking in an article, you want to go against that grind and stuff. Is that right?
I think self-discipline is massively overrated as a change strategy. It's still culturally celebrated and rewarded. We're told by people who succeeded that the way they got there was just hard work and discipline. It's not true. It can't be true, because self-discipline is a young man's game or a young woman's game. The mechanics of self-discipline is energy against yourself. And therefore, it's based on a presupposition that there's something wrong with you. There's something fat, lazy, recalcitrant, bad about you. And your only chance of winning is to beat that part or suppress that part or override that part. So you constantly have to fight your way forward. And you can do that when you're young because you've got energy to waste.
Yeah.
It's not about efficiency when you're young. You get to midlife. Firstly, you don't have room for wasted energy. Secondly, you've been so unkind to yourself, or based on this presupposition there's something wrong with you. Often the unconscious goes, this is rubbish. Like, I don't want to play this game anymore. Like,
right.
You think I'm terrible? Right. Well, now I'll be terrible then. I'll sabotage. I'll get in the way. I'll pull the handbrake on. So the massive transition midlife in terms of motivation, if you don't find a way to work with yourself and understand self-permission, then this thing grinds to a halt, and you think there's something really wrong because you can't access these high levels of motivation anymore that you used to do when you were young. So you have to find a way to make peace with yourself, understand yourself, examine these narratives around not being no good, and deconstruct them so that you can operate as one with full permission to be at your best where it matters most.
You brought up an interesting phrase, self-permission. We're allowed to do things a little different than what society deems for us to do, if you will. Tell us a little bit about that. I think that's interesting.
Well, yeah, I think from midlife, you need permission from yourself to be okay. If you imagine there's a safety officer inside you who says your life is not safe, your beliefs are not safe, your assumptions are not safe, your operating system is not safe. You want success, but you don't have the operating system to sustain it. So it pulls the handbrake on. You want to succeed, you're going to need permission from your own self. And you'll get permission when your internal setup is safe, when you've developed beliefs that are safe, when you've developed adult strategies for meeting your need for significance and love and certainty, and you've upgraded and become an adult. So then you can go into the world, you can be yourself, and whether people like you or not, whether people cheer you on or not, doesn't change anything, because the safety is your own ability to validate and accept yourself. There's no insecurity there. So now you can go into the world. Whereas if you go into the world and increase your exposure and still have unresolved insecurity, you're so precariously placed. You leave yourself incredibly vulnerable, because if someone doesn't give you what you need, then you crumble. You then obsess about it. You feel so terrible and you crave more, and you're driving yourself, and it becomes a real mess.
Wow. Well, that's some good information. Where can people find out more about you, your website? Tell us about that, because I want to make sure people can get to you. I mean, this is good information. Very, very intuitive, and tell us where they can find you.
Thanks, Bob. So if you were to look for the Insecurity Project, you'll find my own podcast, Spotify, Apple, all the places that host podcasts. If you can work out how to spell my name, Jaemin Frazer, I'm the only Jaemin Frazer in the world as far as I can tell. So my website is jaeminfrazer.com. You'll find me on the socials as Jaemin Frazer. And check out my books on Amazon or Booktopia or on my website. But the main one in line with this is Unhindered, the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity. That represents my life's work on the subject. And most people don't think you can solve insecurity. It's just something you manage, but I'm absolutely convinced it's a solvable problem.
Jaemin, thank you so much for this today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. I really appreciate this. We'll put all this, we'll put the correct spelling of your name and everything so people can find you on the show notes, so people will have all that. But I want to thank you again for taking the time to be a guest on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's been great.
Great. Thank you.